Welcome to the Instagram stories for Monday, December 13th. Before we get into what head of Instagram Adam Mosseri talked about on his Ask Me Anything, I realized that I did a whole episode about the feed becoming chronological again as an option, and I recorded that Wednesday evening. I thought I set it up to go Thursday morning, but apparently I never pushed submit, or somehow that didn't work. So all you guys were listening to the same episode over again, and I didn't realize it. Normally I do listen to my own show just to make sure that things work, but for whatever reason, I didn't, and you guys all never got a new episode. So let's just shortcut all of that to say Adam Mosseri testified in front of the Senate subcommittee that they were considering bringing back the chronological feed and were planning to do that. Here's a little bit more detail from the Ask Me Anything on Friday, explaining that in his own words. The first question: is the chronological feed coming back? Here's his answer.
Yes, but to be clear, we're not moving away from ranking altogether. We're going to give people the option to go to a chronological version of feed, because people should have control over their experience. But at a high level, we believe that ranking helps us connect people with the content that matters to them most.
I'm just going to give my whole opinion on this situation. You can agree or not, but I'm going to file all of this in the same category as the link in stories. Started to swipe up, now it's a sticker, whatever. It's been too long, and I think we've all finally become accustomed to not having things in chronological order. I can prove this very quickly. How many people have you ever seen complain about TikTok not being in chronological order? No one. Literally no one complains that TikTok is not in chronological order because the algorithm works to give you the content that you want. I think in 2015, 2016, this was a really important thing. But in 2022, not so much. Next question. How do I put my feed in chronological order? He gives a little bit more detail.
You can't right now, but because we believe it's important that people can shape Instagram into what's best for them, we are experimenting with two different versions. One where you pick your favorites and they show up at the top in chronological order, and the other where you can limit to everyone who you're following, and that would be in chronological order.
I want to say that those options sort of remind me of the way they implemented hiding likes. You had the ability to hide them on your own posts or hide them on other people's posts. And I think that level of customization is really good. The problem is, if those settings are too far buried, your average user is, number one, not going to know that they exist, or number two, never even find them. So I'm kind of hesitant on that, and I highly doubt that those would be the default options. As soon as you sign in, it's automatically giving you your favorites. You probably wouldn't want that anyway. I would think that you would have to specifically turn that on and maybe even turn that on every time. I'm completely speculating at this point, but that is something I would very much like to get more clarity on. All right, so when would this happen? Question: when will we see the chronological feed back in action? Good news, sooner than you might think.
Currently, we're targeting early next year, so not too long. We're already testing the favorites idea, and the following sort of full chronological idea will follow shortly thereafter.
All right, I heard early next year, which sounds good to me. Okay, let's shift gears and move to a new topic. When Adam Mosseri testified in front of the Senate subcommittee, he talked about a lot of things that had to do with parental controls. One of the things that I did talk about last week was how much Instagram and Facebook are implementing right now in terms of parental controls and teen protections, trying to keep younger people safe on the platforms, which I do think is incredibly important, and I think a lot more has to be done in that area. However, the bigger question is, why are Facebook and Instagram and other companies like Google and YouTube doing all of this right now? Interestingly, a lot of these things are coming because of laws that are set in the UK all around something called age-appropriate design. I was reading up on this over the weekend. There was a really great New York Times article that I'm definitely going to recommend and link to in the show notes, so check that out. It explains why companies are making so many steps in this direction right now. The question that Adam Mosseri got is, will you have different recommendations for teens versus adults? Here's his answer, and again, remember that age-appropriate design that the UK is mandating.
Right now, there are rules about what can and cannot be on Instagram, and rules about what we can and cannot recommend in places like Explore. Those are universal. Over time, though, I expect us to move to more age-specific guidelines for recommendations. We call this age-appropriate design.
Okay, so you heard him mention this concept, age-appropriate design, as if it's something that Facebook and Instagram came up with. But this is a guideline that's required in the United Kingdom if you want your app or your service or your website to be available there. This is something the United States should absolutely be looking at, imitating and implementing the exact same way, because you notice it makes companies take action. I think that is the biggest takeaway there. Okay, there's a lot more questions and answers I could go into. I feel like there's a lot more Instagram news to talk about. So come back tomorrow. We're going to do more Instagram news as always. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm really glad that you listened to the show.
I'm not yet a member of the Instagram team, but my podcast covers many Instagram themes. But the name, image, logos are trademarks at Instagram and the LCC in the USA and every territory. Everything I publish independently until Zuck returns my DMs and starts to pay my salary. Not sponsored or endorsed, no lies, no fallacies. I use their logo with permission, not malicious or callously. No trademark violation, filling all criteria. Follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Daniel Hill Media.
If you enjoy the show and you want to support, I would love that. It's not required, but it's certainly appreciated. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/IG stories. Again, buymeacoffee.com/IG stories, and feel free to just buy me a cup of coffee. If you would like to click that link directly without needing to remember it, you can just go into the show notes, which you can find on Apple Music or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. Tap the link and you will go right there. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.